Jujutsu Kaisen came up with its penultimate chapter this week, and we can say that things are looking set for a grand conclusion for the story, seeing the main trio of Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara get a lot of focus. This week's chapter was quite lighthearted in comparison to the last few, and at the same time, it was also exciting, as the main trio is now set to fight one last battle before the series wraps up. At the same time, this chapter also confused quite a lot of fans, largely due to how some plot points still remain untackled, which has confused quite a lot of the readers. JJK Chapter 270 begins with a funeral for Tsumiki. This was something that we had expected would happen after the conclusion of the Shinjuku showdown. Tsumiki was one of the people that needed saving in the culling game. In fact, Megumi's biggest reason to even enter the culling game was to save Tsumiki. He even asked Yuji's help to accomplish that, but in the end, failed, partially killing her by his own hands. Now Megumi cannot do much, but at the very least, he can give her a proper funeral, and that is precisely what he did. A proper grave for Tsumiki was made in this chapter, and it was also revealed that she was cremated before, which Shoko helped with, in order to make her look beautiful for the afterlife. Of course, she still doesn't believe in the afterlife, but she does think that they should look pretty as they finally pass on. She also commented on Geto, stating that she should have been allowed to do the same for him. However, she never got the chance, which eventually led to Kenjaku finding his body, and the rest is history. The scene with Megumi and Shoko was certainly interesting, and finally, it gives us a closure in regards to the story arc of this brilliant character. We also know that Megumi is now content with what happened, and at the same time, he is now willing to live to make a better future for the remaining people of the world, and help Yuji create a better world. Although we got a scene at a graveyard at the beginning of the chapter, this moment was quite surprising, because it did not include Gojo at all. Given that Gojo fell in the battle against Sukuna, and how important he is to the students, Gojo Satoru should certainly have had a scene at the graveyard, especially when we did get to see the graveyard in the chapter. Surprisingly, a funeral procession for Gojo was not held, which is a very strange decision and has confused all the readers. In fact, it only strengthened the idea that Gojo might actually not have died and that he is still alive in some way or form. Now, what exactly went down with Gojo remains unknown, and it is also unknown what happened to his body, given that Utah's swap has already been confirmed, which means that Gojo's body, which is intact, needs to be somewhere at this point. Hopefully, this question will be answered in JJK Chapter 271, which is now quite close. We will see quite a lot of culling game players in this chapter. Even the ancient sorcerers who were revived were seen in the chapter, and at the same time, those who awakened new cursed techniques, such as Higuruma, among others, were also heavily featured in the chapter. It felt like JJK Chapter 270 existed largely to drop the curtains on the stories of the culling game players, which was certainly exciting, to say the least. We saw characters like Daido living in the current Japan and going about their day. Most importantly, we also got to see Takaba, who was revealed to be alive, much to the surprise of the fans. Previously, we all had assumed that he died after his battle against Kenjaku. But now, it is confirmed that he is alive. More importantly, was seen speaking to a character who looked remarkably like Geto. Yes, it's true there was someone beside her who was completely looked like Geto. Now, we don't know if and how Geto has returned, but what is clear is that this character bears his character design, and even his manner of speaking is quite similar. Whether it truly is Geto or Kenjaku, we do not know. As Takaba possesses the ability to turn anything that he thinks is funny into reality, Kenjaku or Geto could certainly have been brought back to life using his powers, which makes things more interesting for the future. Hopefully, we will get a proper reveal of who this character is and what the author plans to do with him later down the line in JJK. Finally, JJK Chapter 270 set up the end of the series. Taking the series back to its roots, we saw a couple who were tormented by a cursed spirit or a curse user. Essentially, a woman was seeing her fiancé with giant eyes, and this was freaking her out. Clearly, she believed that something was wrong with her fiancé. However, upon the sorcerers arriving on scene, it was clearly seen that the guy was totally fine, and that it was the woman who was actually being harassed by a curse user. Megumi did not sense any malicious intent from him. Megumi theorizes that this is a player who awakened a curse technique and took part in the culling game. In either case, this individual needs to be dealt with, which means that Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara are going to have a big mission at hand in the upcoming chapter of JJK. They have to find and defeat this curse user so as to stop his harassment, which means that we will get to see them combine one last time before the story finally moves on and concludes. Now, JJK is heading into its final week, which means that the story is officially going to wrap up soon. This has been a remarkable ride for all of us. And of course, while they would have liked for it to continue for longer, it's time for the author to rest. But that certainly does not mean the JJK will never continue. As things stand, there is a huge announcement to be made alongside the final chapter of JJK, and the editor of the series recently dropped a message stating that things are far from ending and there is more to come. What exactly this means remains to be seen, but now there is a big chance that after last chapter of JJK it might be returned with its sequel. As for its officially confirmation, we need to wait until JJK final chapter dropped next week.